Hey friends! I don't think I've ever anticipated a watercolor set the way I've anticipated, researched, and prepared for this one. I first found out about these paints in a Skillshare video by the Art Mother, and I knew I had to get them. I watched a ton of videos about these watercolors while I waited for mine to arrive, but so far I haven't seen anyone work with the full 48 color set, so that's what I'm here to do today. This is the Koh-i-Noor Brilliant or Analinki watercolor set of 48 colors. These are aniline dye-based solid watercolors that come in stacking discs which lock together. The colors themselves aren't arranged in any particular order, and that's because Koh-i-Noor also sells these in sets of 24 and 36, which match the first 4 and 6 discs of this set. Consequently, if you start with a smaller set and then spring for 48 colors, you'll end up with a lot of duplicates, but I don't consider that a bad thing. These are not to be confused with the Koh-i-Noor Watercolor Wheel Stack Pack, a visually identical set of opaque watercolors released by Chartpak in the US. If you go to buy a set of these, check the description carefully. I bought my set from an Etsy seller in Prague called Foxberry Store, and it arrived in the US in 2 weeks despite the current worldwide shipping delays. The set was $24 with free shipping, or roughly 50 cents per color. My first impressions of this set are overall positive. I've painted with various forms of dye-based watercolor before. Using the liquid kind required too much setup and desk space, while peerless watercolors, though convenient, felt too precious to use. Jane Davenport Mermaid markers and my own homemade versions are bright and fun, but not precision tools. I was drawn to the Koh-i-Noor set because it packs the punch of dyes in a more user-friendly, solid form, and after using them for a few days, I'm not disappointed. The paints are fun to play with in bright, exuberant splashes, but it's also possible to use them in traditional watercolor ways. And they're cheap enough that I don't feel bad about really digging into my favorite colors. They invoke a childlike joy in color. There is hardly any drying shift, by which I mean the colors don't lighten as they dry like most watercolors do, so you know up front exactly what you'll get. These paints may look familiar if you live in Australia. Mikador, an Australian brand, sells the same Koh-i-Noor paints in white discs, but their colors are slightly rearranged. The upshot of the Mikador sets is that they have named all their colors, which makes them much easier to keep track of. So if you're in Australia, I do recommend getting a Mikador set. For the rest of the world, you'd pay a premium in shipping, and as of this video, Mikador's 48 color set has not yet been released. Mikador has also provided light fastness ratings for all their colors using Koh-i-Noor's light fastness scale, and with a little guesswork you can apply the same information to the Koh-i-Noor set. Since these paints are dye-based, I expected very little in the way of light fastness, and it really doesn't matter to me because I work in sketchbooks. However, I was pleasantly surprised to find that several colors have ratings on par with professional pigment-based watercolors. I arranged my discs in order based roughly on the Mikador color list. The other trade-off with this set is that aniline dye is toxic. Koh-i-Noor includes a warning in their packaging about the choking hazard of the small cakes, but not about toxicity. I don't know if they've treated their paints somehow to make them non-toxic, but since none of the descriptions for the Koh-i-Noor or Mikador sets mention that they are non-toxic, I would err on the side of caution. In the same way you wouldn't give a small child a professional watercolor set containing cadmium and other harmful ingredients, don't let kids use aniline paints without careful supervision. Don't lick your brush, and don't eat paint. All of these colors are transparent and staining, apart from the white in disc 1 and the beautiful pearlescent white in disc 6. All that being said, the quality of these paints is inconsistent. I can't necessarily fault them for that. Even if you buy a set of 48 colors from a professional pigment-based watercolor brand, they won't deliver consistent color payoff across all the paints. Some of the Koh-i-Noor colors are overwhelmingly vibrant with lots of tinting strength, so bright that they blow out my camera, while others are insipid and seem to be made mostly of the cheap-feeling binder that Koh-i-Noor used to turn these dyes into solid cakes. Sometimes the binder even produces a granulating effect. Some colors separate when used wet in wet or diluted, which can be fun to play with, but it adds to the cheap feel. There are also 2 to 3 discs worth of near duplicate colors, and part of my goal in this video is to help you decide whether the 24, 36, or 48 color set would give you the color selection you need. Because of the differences in vibrancy and tinting strength, a mixing palette with separate wells is vital for managing your water ratios and mixes. All the Koh-i-Noor and Micador sets come with a clear lid that doubles as a mixing palette. Furthermore, I highly recommend using a water brush with these paints. It is much easier to deal with refilling a water brush than with changing out your rinse water every 5 minutes because the dyes have saturated it. To conserve paint, drag your brush against the edge of a well in the mixing palette before switching colors. Keep a washcloth on hand for cleaning your water brush and you'll be set. Since so many of these colors look the same in dried form, a cataloging system is a must for working with this set. I'll include a link to the swatch wheels I made below. I oriented the discs based on whichever color is easiest to differentiate at a glance. Out of all the individual discs, the one I labeled Disc 5 is the only one that could be usable on its own, with a yellow, peach, pink, purple, blue, and turquoise. This disc is in the 36 color set and the 48 color set. However, most of these colors are very faint and otherwise light in value, and I wanted a standalone palette with a little more punch. My first step was to find the 3 watercolor primaries. The second disc has an extremely vibrant cyan, capable of reaching dark values, and I'm using this as I would use a phthalo blue green shade. There are 3 yellows distributed across discs 1, 5, and 7 that all resemble cadmium yellow. They're pretty much interchangeable, but I preferred the one in the disc 5 for its tinting strength. Unfortunately, one major omission from this set is a primary magenta. I purchased the set of 24 off Amazon at first, and I hoped the latter 4 discs in the full 48 color set would include something that could mix the way quinacridone pink does, but no dice. Disc 3 has a slightly cool red, an opera rose, and a sort of alizarin crimson. Out of the 3 of them, opera rose is the most versatile for purples, blues, and oranges, but it can't reach dark values and has only a fraction of the tinting strength of my chosen primary blue or yellow. Next, I looked for colors that will neutralize to brown and gray. Disc 2 and Disc 8 both include a warm blue. Neither played well with the bright oranges in Disc 1 and Disc 7, but when I tried them with the warm brown in Disc 8, I fell in love with the purplish combination. The rest of this selection process was a matter of personal preference for secondary and tertiary colors. I worked some of these colors wet in wet to see which ones separated and which of each pair I liked better. I ended up with my 3 primaries, the neutralizing blue and brown, a bright orange, cool red, electric purple, turquoise, dark green, and spring green, and a tan that performs like a raw sienna or quinacridone gold. Out of the full 8-disc set, I selected 3 colors from discs 7 and 8, but there were near matches for all of them in discs 1 through 6. Also, 7 of my selections came from the first 4 discs, the same colors that are included in the 24-color set. Color preferences are a personal thing, and I encourage you to look back at my swatches so you can see if any of the colors in the 36 and 48 color sets are must-haves for you. But now what? My 12 colors are spread across 7 out of 8 discs, and that takes up a huge footprint on my desk. Having to remember which disc my favorite colors are in is a real pain, and while others have praised the portability of the interlocking discs, I've tried painting out with them and it's not feasible. I need something that puts my 12 favorite colors in a more conventional format. That's where my other purchase from Foxberry Store comes in. This is the 12-color Koh-i-Noor Anna Linky set. These paints are in a little plastic box that reminds me of kindergarten. Once again, there are duplicates here, but the 12-color set does not precisely duplicate the first 2 discs of the larger sets. There is a brown and a dark green that match colors in the 4th and 8th discs. Removing watercolor cakes from the Koh-i-Noor discs is a messy job, but it can be done without crumpling the cakes. It's best to do this before you use too much of the paint. First, gently heat the bottom of the plastic disc. Next, run a palette knife around the edge of the cake. Switch to a thicker plastic tool, either another palette knife or a piece from an old gift card, and do the same motion. At this point, the cake should start to rotate slightly in its well. I recommend gloves for this part, otherwise your fingers will get pretty stained. Nobody in my town has gloves in stock right now, so I used finger cots. With 2 fingers, continue rotating the cake. It's held in place with a dab of gummy glue at the bottom, and this will start to bunch up as you twist, raising the disc out of the well. Once enough of it has cleared the edge, you can use your plastic tool to lever the cake free or just pull it out by hand. When you've got the cake out, you can place it into its new home. I used the same process to remove the colors I don't want from the 12 color set and put the colors I do want in the right order. You could also do this with a children's watercolor set that uses round cakes, but be prepared to secure the Koh-i-Noor cakes in wells that are too big with a little hot glue. This turned out to be a pretty intensive process. After removing about 5 colors, I was seriously questioning my life and my choices. But now I've got a condensed selection of colors I can easily take with me that mix well together and work for a variety of subjects. I painted out with this set this morning, and they worked great together. I have arranged swatches from my 36 leftover colors in a Ranger alcohol ink palette as a sort of catalog, but transferring those from the discs will be a project for another day, or 3. Koh-i-Noor's brilliant watercolors are, on average, incredibly vibrant and beautiful. With a little modification, this also becomes a functional and versatile set. Thanks so much for watching.